concept assembly line, where ideas get to work. We don't show up to town halls the way we used to, not because we don't care, but because we're tired, broke, and late for a second job. In post-war America, civic life had a texture: block parties, bowling leagues, neighborhood associations, union halls, church picnics. Democracy wasn't just something that happened every 2 or 4 years at the ballot box. It happened in backyards and community centers, in overheard conversations, at the barber shop or PTA meetings. Politics, in its most basic sense, was personal. But that kind of democracy demands bandwidth. It requires more than just the right to participate. It requires the capacity to. And in 21st century America, that capacity is collapsing under the weight of a manufactured scarcity. Not physical scarcity, not food lines or fuel rations, but the slow, grinding erosion of disposable income and disposable time, the building blocks of any functioning civic society. It's easy to chalk up this erosion to globalization, automation, or the invisible hand of the market. But dig deeper, and you find something more insidious: a collective misunderstanding of how our economic engine actually runs. We've been told again and again that the federal government must live within its means, as if it were a household, that every dollar spent must be taxed or borrowed, that deficits are inherently dangerous and debt is a burden on our grandchildren. But this narrative, though widely accepted, is demonstrably false. In truth, the US government, as the issuer of its own sovereign currency, spends first and taxes second. It does not need to find the money any more than a football stadium needs to find the points before it can kick off a game. It creates the currency. The real constraint isn't money, it's productive capacity, labor, resources, infrastructure. And by pretending otherwise, we've imposed an artificial scarcity that corrodes everything it touches. Scarcity makes people turn inward. It forces us to fight over crumbs instead of building a bigger pie. When parents are working 60 hours a week to afford rent and insulin, there's little energy left to attend school board meetings or volunteer on campaigns. When wages stagnate, but housing and childcare skyrocket, civic participation becomes a luxury item. And when civic space shrinks, tribal identities swell. We lose not only shared spaces, but shared stories. And in that void, extremism thrives. Conspiracies, culture wars, zero-sum politics. Because when the economy feels rigged and the future feels stolen, the search for someone to blame becomes irresistible. Scarcity isn't just an economic condition, it's a civic hazard. It hollows out community trust, erodes shared purpose, and replaces collective problem-solving with tribal grievance. It breaks down the lines of communication. It forces us to stop empathizing with our fellow citizens because our collective sense of other becomes an ever-widening net. It sows division that tears at connections unfathomable a few decades ago. Not just Republican versus Democrat, or liberal versus conservative, but brothers versus sisters, parents versus children. We have already seen it dissolving into political violence. The irony is that many Americans across the political spectrum share a nostalgic vision of a better time, a post-war golden era when a single income could support a family, homes were affordable, and public institutions were strong. That world didn't emerge from thin air. It was built with bold public investment, expansive federal programs, and a willingness to treat quality of life as a national priority, not a personal chore. The New Deal, the GI Bill, public housing, federally subsidized education, and massive infrastructure projects weren't paid for by magic. They were paid for by fiat. These aren't utopian dreams. They're pragmatic applications of what we already know but have forgotten. That the wealth of a nation lies not in its austerity, but in its capacity to invest in its people. America is not a poor country. It never has been. Yet millions of Americans live in conditions that would seem absurdly unacceptable to those same families a generation or two ago. Parents delay dental work because their kids' checkups are too expensive. Seniors ration insulin. Teachers drive for Uber after school to pay for groceries. Every small setback becomes a crisis because there's no slack left in the rope. We've accepted this not because it's inevitable, but because we've been sold a lie that money is finite and the government is just another household that must live within its means. The real constraint is not dollars, it's the capacity to produce, to build, to heal, to educate. And when we underinvest in that capacity, we don't just hurt the economy, we starve our civic life. Imagine what this country could look like if we stopped pretending we were broke. The two-income trap disappears. A family of 4 can live on one full-time income again, not luxuriously, but securely. The other partner is free to care for children, pursue education, or run for local office. Not because they're lucky, but because we built an economy where housing, healthcare, and childcare are publicly anchored, not profit maximized. Commutes shrink. Public investment in transit and walkable neighborhoods means you're no longer spending 2 hours a day in a car. You make it to your kid's game. You join a town council meeting on Tuesday night. You have dinner at home, and the stove's already warm. Retirement is not a cliff. Social Security has been expanded into a robust, universal pension. You don't fear outliving your 401k. You don't stare at mutual fund charts like they're EKGs. Aging becomes dignified, not desperate. Jobs become a choice, not a lifeline. With a federal job guarantee in place, nobody fears destitution if they lose a gig. And when employers must compete with dignified public employment, wages and conditions rise. The balance of power shifts quietly but meaningfully. Healthcare is no longer a gamble. Medical debt is a relic. You get care when you need it, not when it fits your deductible. Your kid gets their asthma treated before it sends them to the ER. Your elderly parent doesn't have to pick between prescriptions and groceries. Housing stabilizes. Public options return to the housing market. Not just shelters, but entire neighborhoods. Beautiful, mixed income, well-maintained, affordable by design. Renting no longer means volatility. Owning no longer means indebting yourself for life. Now imagine what kind of citizen that person becomes. They empathize. They vote. They volunteer. They show up to public meetings. They run for office. They trust. They hope. They build. This is not utopia. It's memory. A version of this world existed, at least in part, for millions of Americans after World War II. But it wasn't luck. It was policy. It was federal investment. It was public commitment to full employment, accessible housing, low-cost college, union jobs, and infrastructure that connected people rather than isolating them. And yes, it was all deficit-financed. The antidote to political division isn't centrism, it's capacity. When people aren't scrambling to survive, they show up. They collaborate. They vote for things instead of just against them. Scarcity breeds fear, but abundance breeds democracy. It's time we stop pretending we're broke and start asking what kind of country we want to build and what kind of civic life we want to reclaim. This video is part of a broader project to reimagine public policy for real people, grounded in modern monetary theory, committed to abundance over austerity, and focused on rebuilding the freedom infrastructure of everyday life. If my work resonates with you, share it. Subscribe on YouTube for more multi-format content. Together, we can reclaim what was once built and build it back better